I, 23F, don't think I am in love with my husband, 23M. Am I okay to feel this way? I believe I have fallen out of love with my husband, and I am uncertain if I have a valid reason to feel this way. I'm also unsure of what to do. I am a 23-year-old female, and I think I am experiencing regrets about marrying my 23-year-old male husband. We have been in a relationship for 7 years and have been married for 6 months. Let me provide some background information. My now husband and I started dating when we were 16 years old. Throughout high school, we often went through difficult times until I moved into his parents' house during COVID-19, which coincided with the last semester of my 12th grade year. Some of the more troubling incidents include him placing my necklace, which held a key he had handcrafted from a large, railed nail and other materials, such as a stainless steel heart, into a jar of peroxide so that the key would rust. He told me that I had until it rusted away to repair our relationship. There was also occasional pressure for sexual intimacy, refusal to engage in any activities I wanted to do, and instances where he told me I deserved the pain I experienced, whether it was self-inflicted or accidental. You get the idea. Here are some specific issues. He never liked my family. My mother would not permit me to stay overnight at his house. This was reasonable, given that I was a teenage girl, and this created resentment toward my parents on his part. Any arguments we had stemmed from my perceived inadequacy in spending time with him, or from my spending too much time with male friends instead of him. We briefly broke up in December 2019 for a week and a half, but after some discussions, we reconciled. The reason for that breakup was that I finally confided in my friends about some of his behaviors that I found hurtful or strange. Talking to others about what constitutes normal behavior versus what does not was immensely helpful. Everyone was appalled by some of the issues I mentioned. While I recognize that I am not perfect by any means, I previously believed that these were compromises one should accept. Neither of us had previous relationship experience, so we had no understanding of how relationships functioned. Prior to being informed otherwise, I convinced myself that this was what being in a relationship entailed, and that no one is perfect. To summarize, we broke up, reconciled, but under an ultimatum. We could get back together if I agreed to never speak to my male friends again, particularly one in particular. That individual was to be blocked, and I was to avoid him at school. Foolishly, I consented. I complied with his demands and ceased communication with him for several years. This marked the beginning of my isolation. Everything was meant to be better once I moved in with him during COVID-19. From my perspective at the time, it became better. He was no longer initiating fights every 1 to 2 weeks. We spent ample time together, and it all seemed fine. I had very few friends to begin with due to him, and with COVID-19, I became almost completely isolated. I lived at his parents' house on their farm. I scarcely saw my parents, could not partake in my sport due to COVID-19, and did not go anywhere or see anyone. I completed my 12th grade and worked through the summer before college. We rented a room in a house since our schools were close to each other, though about 2.5 hours from his parents' residence. Each of our programs lasted 2 years, and he had already completed 1 year. While living away from home, I saw him only 3 days during the week, despite the expectation that we would be living together. He would drive back home every week or weekend, leaving me to study in the college town. He worked on projects during the time he was home. This routine continued throughout my first year of college, which primarily consisted of online lectures during outbreaks, but being alone in an unfamiliar town made it more challenging for me. During my second year, I stayed on campus and drove down nearly every weekend to spend time with him. This was sometimes difficult due to the studying I needed to do, but I persevered. He imposes rules on me: no drinking, smoking, partying, tattoos, or piercings. I did not typically drink, but occasionally I would. Each time I went out with the new friends I made in college, I would inform him. With each outing, he would scold me over the phone. Consequently, I stopped spending time with those friends, as most of their activities involved drinking. While these friends were entirely supportive of my decision not to drink during events, I would be accused of drinking merely for hanging out with them, so I distanced myself from them. After college, I returned to live in his parents' house. I desired my own space as we had during college. He assured me that things would improve once we got married and had our own house. So I endured living with my in-laws. I saved a significant amount of money, and we purchased land together in 2022. This land is adjacent to his parents' house, making it easier to work on during any free days. Moving forward, at this point, I found a new job in my field and made friends with some of my coworkers. Everything appeared to be going well. Now, regarding our plans for the house, I realize I should have been more involved. He intended to finalize a design for the build, which I thought was great. This would be the beginning of actually building and obtaining a home together. I considered what kind of house we might have, but we did not delve into the details too deeply. One day while I was at work, he and his mother spoke with the engineer who was preparing the plans. He created the entire house design that day without my input. His mother provided feedback on aspects like the siding and flooring. When I returned home, he excitedly shared that he needed help deciding between two designs and that I could contribute to the selection process. I never thought much about this scenario at the time. I wonder if I am being irrational, but why was I left out of the design discussion? I will be living there too. Perhaps it is selfish to think this way. I simply wish I had been part of that conversation. Fast forward 2 years to 2024. I still do not spend much time with friends or coworkers. I maintain some friendships with those coworkers, but usually keep to myself. I did not mention earlier that, in the spring of 2022, right after I graduated from college, I brought home a puppy that had been surrendered at the place where I work. I did not discuss this with my now husband. I called my mother to ask if she thought I could handle a puppy. The puppy needed surgery and a new home. My mother gave her approval, so I brought her home post-operation. He was initially upset, but stated that the dog was my responsibility, which was fair. I realize I acted selfishly by not discussing it with him first. Regardless of this situation, we became engaged and married in the summer of 2024. He has begun talking about starting a family. Initially, I also wanted children. Recently, however, I have come to the conclusion that I do not want children, at least not with him. I know that if we had a child, my experience would be similar to his mother's. She handled all the childcare responsibilities with very little assistance from her husband. I have attempted to discuss my feelings about this with him, but the conversations always follow the same pattern. He argues that I should be responsible for household tasks because he performs all the outdoor tasks and heavily contributes to building our future home through physical labor. Keep in mind, we do not even have a foundation for this house yet. Currently, there is only a driveway and some rocks. I do not mind handling most of the housework since I have much higher cleanliness standards, but I am doing everything. I struggle to get him to take out the trash, put away his clean clothes, or even place dirty clothes in the basket rather than on the floor. I can manage these tasks, but I would appreciate some help occasionally, and he consistently refuses. He insists that this will be how things are when we have a child, and that he will be the primary breadwinner at that point while I will be home all day. Given the household chores I complete after working 12 to 14-hour shifts, I feel some resentment, leading to a lack of intimacy in our relationship. He used to complain about this more, but has eased off somewhat. I feel terrible for thinking this way, but I genuinely regret marrying this man at this stage. It's as if I have a child who avoids chores and criticizes me when I return home from work. A few days ago, I discussed my feelings with him, expressing that I was unhappy with our current relationship. He responded defensively and highlighted all the things he dislikes about my behavior, which is fair. I did not intend for it to turn combative, but perhaps I did not articulate my thoughts clearly. I feel as though he believes he loves me, but I feel like I am merely being utilized as a housekeeper and a source of sexual release. It's as if we are roommates with benefits. I do not feel appreciated or loved in the way I try to express my love for him. I am unsure how to proceed. Am I feeling this way due to seasonal depression? I recognize that I am far from perfect. Do I even have the right to feel this way? Leaving would be challenging. I would have to move all my belongings. Thank you all for your support. I apologize for any typos or confusion in the order of my story. Story 2. My boyfriend, 28M, is a pretty bad partner, but I, 24F, feel so attached and don't know how to leave. What would you do in my shoes? Buckle up, because this is a long post, and I need to be told how foolish I am being. It is also important to note that I do love my boyfriend, and the things I am writing do not reflect any of the good aspects. However, the negative aspects weigh so heavily on my mind that they are all I can think about as I type. My boyfriend, 28 years old, male, and I, 24 years old, female, have been dating for just over 2 years now, but it has been quite rocky. Although I know our situation is not ideal, I feel it is essential to hear others' opinions because I do not have anyone in my life to discuss this with, and I feel like I am perpetuating cycles of abuse that feel familiar. It started 3 months into our relationship. I thought I had found the perfect man, but I had my reservations due to past trauma and abandonment issues. It turns out my concerns were justified. I had left for a work trip and decided to do some investigating. Some may label it as toxic behavior, but I call it intuition. During my late-night search, I accidentally clicked on a girl's Instagram story. The next day, I received an agitated direct message telling me to get off her page and that my boyfriend was quite strange. Naturally, having no idea what was happening, I felt ashamed and informed the girl that I was unsure what she was referencing, which led me to discover that before my boyfriend and I began dating, he had been using dating apps. This did not seem like a significant issue, even though I became a one-man woman the moment I met him, as I understood that no commitment had been established. However, I later learned that he had been flirting, sexually, I should add, with this girl while we were actively dating, which altered my perspective entirely. I think I could rationalize it because it was not physical. However, when I confronted him, he stated that he did it because he needed more attention than I was providing. This context will be significant later, and that he only led this Instagram girl on because he thought it was amusing. I told him it was appalling to lead someone on like that when there is no intention of following through and then ghosting, yet I stayed with him because I was away for a month and felt I had to have a conversation before definitively ending the relationship. This was a mistake. I should have ended it there. After this incident, my boyfriend appeared to feel immense regret, or so it seemed. He allowed me to log into all of his social media accounts and shared his location with me. I disliked doing this because this was my first relationship where I believed such measures were unnecessary. However, on these social media platforms, I uncovered much more information. Little did he know, social media retains a lot of data. With this information, I was able to download and see a plethora of girls he had been in contact with. Many of these interactions were from before our relationship began, but there were still many girls he had communicated with between March, when we first met, and May, when we began dating. This was shocking because, when we started talking, he informed me that I was the only one, and yes, I am naive when it comes to love. As I went through his data, I consider this acceptable since he granted me full access. My perception of him completely shifted. I also saw interactions and sexual flirting with girls during the initial months we were dating, which was disappointing, but I think I always had a sense in the back of my mind. I just wasn't willing to admit it. Among his data were conversations with his cousins discussing the list of girls they had slept with, referring to girls derogatorily, and comparing me to other girls he had been involved with, overall just being disrespectful. I was utterly heartbroken, yet I did not leave. Perhaps it was because we had a trip to Hawaii planned right when I returned. Maybe it was due to my desire to see him in person with this new understanding once more. Upon returning from my trip, I saw signs of remorse and hoped it would last. Suddenly, I was showered with affection and felt prioritized. Writing all of this out, I recognize how it sounds. It is important to mention that we live long distance, so we spend most of our time on FaceTime. As the months passed and our initial problem seemed to be buried, I began to notice his efforts diminishing. Though it appeared that our relationship was stable, my boyfriend started playing video games and stopped doing the little things I appreciated. When I brought this up, it would be dismissed, only for the conversation to circle back. "Well, you don't ask about my day. Well, you don't do anything for me." I found these responses hurtful, of course, but also untrue and incredibly frustrating. Every time I see him, I prepare meals for him and buy small treats I know he enjoys because it brings me joy. I also inquire about his day, regardless of how mundane it may be, but he has repeatedly stated that he does not care to discuss it. Thus, redirecting the conversation feels like avoidance rather than a resolution of our issues. When I feel upset, I often return to his social media accounts and discover even more unsettling information, such as that he hired his ex-girlfriend of 5 years at one of the branches of the establishment where he works, or that he had been physically involved with other women while in a relationship with me. Additionally, it is worth noting that he never mentions me to his friends or coworkers, to the point where his family still refers to me by a name similar to my own because they cannot remember it, and his coworkers do not even realize he is in a relationship. Regarding the physical aspect, I learned that he had been with another girl the night before asking me to be his girlfriend, received oral sex 2 weeks later while we were already dating, and then reached out in August to propose a hookup, which was declined by the same girl. When I reached out to her, she sent me proof of everything. I also intuitively inquired with a receptionist at his workplace about my boyfriend, who revealed that she had made out with him while I was away on my work trip, only days before all of this was revealed. What was difficult was that this had all happened a year and a half prior. Therefore, when I brought it up, I was dismissed, and it was treated as inconsequential. This leads me to my main point in this post. I feel unimportant in his life. I catch him watching pornography. I have asked him not to, as it makes me uncomfortable, and he agreed, and have caught him searching for nude photos of OnlyFans girls. Whenever I bring any of this up with him, I am labeled as crazy for revisiting the past or for being jealous and insecure. These are his words. I do not think it is unreasonable that, a year after my entire perception of his character was challenged, I still feel hurt and require conversations about it. Now, we are currently in a long-distance arrangement, mostly only seeing each other 2 days a week, and his behavior has become intolerable. I understand it is not beneficial to bring up past issues, but I feel that our conversations never fully restored my trust and that I continue to feel hurt. However, whenever I raise these topics, he immediately deflects the blame onto me and can never acknowledge his shortcomings. He spends more time playing video games than ever, and I can hardly endure it. I try to engage in conversation, but I feel as though I am speaking to a brick wall. If he does respond, it is shallow and thoughtless, indicating that he is not genuinely listening. When I ask him to repeat what I said, he cannot. He no longer inquires about my day, because it is boring, of course. My life may not be the most exciting, but I still believe that taking an interest in the little moments signifies engagement. When I ask him to invest more effort, he immediately shuts me down and refuses to listen or acknowledge his wrongdoings. It is disheartening because, when we are together, I feel incredibly happy and comfortable, but I experience panic attacks as he departs because I know that, as soon as we are on the phone, he treats me like an advertisement pop-up. Despite all this pain, I genuinely love him, and I believe I remain in this relationship because I prefer being aware of the situation than being blindsided again. I recognize that I am caught in a cycle of abuse, which I have encountered with every partner, but it is challenging when even the kinder ones turn out to be worse than the others. I often ponder whether it is my ego and my desire to fit into the couple's society that women are expected to orient themselves around, although I do not agree with it, or if it stems from my abandonment issues and my history of being sexually assaulted by every partner I have had. I would greatly appreciate your thoughts and assistance in regaining clarity. I believe I should leave, even though I am deeply in love, but I do not know how to do so because he occupies all of my thoughts and priorities. I think this may be a consequence of anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and having grown up in a household with 2 narcissists as an only child. Please help. Story 3. Disinviting my friend from an event after I bought her a ticket feels like a betrayal. After a wild night where she attacked my boyfriend during a drunken dispute, I realize our friendship may never be the same. Am I wrong for wanting to step back? Warning. This is graphic and too long. Did not read. Hello everyone, I have been feeling extremely guilty about changing my mind at the last minute, and I need a different perspective. I am struggling to come up with an appropriate response after saying yes during a hectic moment. My contemplation is not if she should go, but rather on the guilt I feel. So my boyfriend's birthday was a month ago, and I treated him to a celebration. I took him to our favorite bar, where we ordered plenty of food and drinks after a fun day out. I also invited my friend, who has recently left an abusive relationship, and my sister and her boyfriend, both of whom were unable to attend. We have been a close group of 5 for several years during special occasions. Over the years, she continued to show up even when her ex-boyfriend did not want her to, and we were unaware of what was happening behind closed doors. Regardless, during the birthday celebration, I purchased 3 tickets for an upcoming event featuring our favorite artist after discussing the tour dates and location, and I informed them that I had secured a ticket for each of us. After leaving the bar, we went to a nearby corner store to buy more alcohol and returned to her place, as it was closer. We spent time hanging out, talking, and overall having a good time. My boyfriend was becoming more intoxicated with each shot while I limited my own drinking, acting as the designated driver on his special day. However, I suddenly needed to run to the store after midnight because my period unexpectedly started, and I was unprepared. My friend didn't have any supplies either. We got into my car and drove to the nearest 24-hour Walgreens. After purchasing what I needed and taking care of my business, we headed back to my car, where my boyfriend was now quite out of it, sitting in the back seat. On the way back, my boyfriend and I got into a minor argument. He tends to be unpleasant when drunk, although he has never resorted to physical actions or insults, preferring to escalate tension. He has acknowledged this issue and has promised to work on it because he knows it drives me crazy when he behaves this way. There has been significant improvement, so our arguments have transformed into minor bickering, which, while annoying, is manageable. My friend interjected, attempting to help him understand why I was upset about his manner, but instead of grasping it, he frustrated her further. This context about her being out of an abusive relationship is significant. Over the years, she has never behaved like this, making her reactions feel very new following her breakup. She became so angry that, as we neared her place, she stood up from her seat, turned around, and began to physically confront him. He merely laughed at her, which only infuriated her more. I tried to intervene while driving, and when I parked in the middle of the road, she removed her heels and started hitting him with them. He was clearly not sober, and you could see it in his posture while she was striking him as hard as she could. I pleaded with her to stop, trying desperately to grab her shoe or her arm, but she ignored my attempts. My boyfriend, adhering to his belief in not hitting women, did not retaliate. I attempted to take the heels from her, but she exited my car and opened the back door before I could lock it or drive away. Crawling into the back, she continued to hit him more aggressively. I ran around to intervene, but when I did, I was accidentally struck in the face a few times with her heel, which caused me to lose my composure. I fell over, and in that moment, my thoughts slowed down, hindering my ability to move quickly. It felt like time had somewhat stopped. I could still see her attacking my boyfriend, and I think he noticed me fall, prompting him to push her away with such force that she fell to the ground and he pinned her down, shouting at her about something concerning me. My comprehension of the situation was still delayed, and I struggled to process anything. Somehow, he returned to my car while I stood up. Suddenly, I felt warmth running down my lips and realized I was bleeding. I stood there, unable to react, possibly in shock. She approached and hugged me, but I didn't want to reciprocate. I did so anyway, feeling completely disassociated. She returned to her apartment, insulting my boyfriend. I remained there, attempting to comprehend what had happened so quickly that I had lost the capacity to articulate my feelings. I got into my car, looked at my boyfriend, and began to cry. There was blood everywhere, on his face, clothes, arms, my hands, the car seat, and the roof of the car. I panicked, took pictures of him just in case, and attempted to clean him up as best as I could. He had an open cut longer than an inch on his forehead that wouldn't stop bleeding, along with more minor cuts in his hair that were difficult to locate and clean. He repeatedly pushed my arm away, but his wounds continued to bleed. Throughout this, he had leaned over with his eyes shut, yet he was still slurring his words. I told him I was taking him to the hospital, but he refused. I remained there, trying to clean him up while also attempting to process everything that had occurred, but it felt overwhelming. Knowing that I couldn't drive because I was trembling and still in a foggy mindset, I called my sister to pick us up. I positioned my car at the entrance to the complex and waited, focusing on trying to clean my boyfriend. My face throbbed intensely, worse than from a punch. While waiting, I kept speaking to him, and then he broke down in my arms. I experienced a flood of guilt and tried to comfort him. I couldn't make sense of what he was saying, but I kept telling him I was sorry and that it was my fault. my sister and her boyfriend arrived, and they transported us home since my boyfriend refused to enter the hospital. They assisted him inside, while I went to the restroom and noticed an open wound on my left lip similar to his large, swollen, and bleeding. My eyes were glossy and red from crying, my face had scratches, my cut was unsightly, and I felt traumatized. Gradually, my mental state began to return as I laid in bed next to my boyfriend, holding him throughout the night. The following day, we didn't really communicate. I think we were both just trying to process the previous night's events while he dealt with a hangover. This had never happened to us before, as we do not resort to violence, so I believe we were lost in our thoughts and somewhat disconnected from reality. We followed our usual Sunday routine, but remained silent. That night, we finally discussed the incident, and he expressed his reluctance to press charges even after I showed him the photos from the prior evening. I took care of him throughout, helping him change his bandages. Later that day, she texted me repeatedly to apologize. I acknowledged her apology, even though I didn't truly feel that it was acceptable, just to make her stop. Since then, I have been somewhat ignoring her and went to her apartment to retrieve the items we left there. My boyfriend accompanied me in the car, and when she came out, she still didn't apologize to him, but instead said she felt terrible about what she did and expressed her sorrow. I did not take her apologies seriously since she never addressed him directly, and she still hasn't to this day. As stated earlier, I have been ignoring her and avoiding doing her any favors. I left it at that. Recently, I received a text from her asking if our plans for the weekend were still on, and I replied affirmatively while in the midst of handling several things at once. My boyfriend and I just moved, and life has been quite hectic. After settling down and having a moment to reflect on what I had texted, I became mad at myself. I also realized that I hadn't taken the time to reflect on our friendship throughout this entire situation. My boyfriend does not want to be near her, and I feel a heavy strain on our friendship that seems unrepairable. Still, there has been no apology to my boyfriend. Consequently, my boyfriend and I made the decision that she should not come, but I am struggling with the guilt of reversing that decision. This is my boyfriend's birthday present. I had already told her the ticket was hers, and I even responded positively to her text. Again, my internal conflict is not about whether she should attend or not, but rather how I will communicate the change to her. So, am I the asshole if I uninvite my friend from an event after purchasing a ticket for her? Story 4. After my boyfriend of 3 years ended things over a misunderstanding, I lost the one person I leaned on most. Just 2 days later, I got fired from my job for showing kindness to a needy coworker. Now, I am stuck in a spiral of anxiety and heartbreak. How do I start over? Hello. I do not really know anywhere else I can express my pain and hurt without being told, "Oh, you will get over it," and receiving backhanded advice that I should go out to the bar or the nearest college party. On March 1st, my boyfriend of 3 years broke up with me. Apparently, I cannot take a joke and take everything to heart. Want to know the joke? It was the withholding of an "I love you" as a joke. I knew he was not serious, but I did become annoyed. He said I am always overly sensitive and take everything to heart. He stated that I suppress him from fully expressing himself, and he has decided he cannot live with that anymore. We shared more good times than bad. We even recently went on a date before he ended things. He also mentioned he does not want to deal with my issues or my family issues because they are too much for him. He said I put too much pressure on him for trying to move back to his hometown where I live. I have been trying for 2 years. I begged. I cried. I tried to do everything possible to convince him not to leave me. He indicated that he had attempted to bring it up many times about how I do not allow him to express himself. I told him I did not say he could not, but he would have to contend with my annoyance at him because I would eventually get over the joke. He was what gave my life meaning. He provided a safe space when I did not have one. I found hope for my future within him. We had made plans together. He said he would marry me. I asked him if he still wanted to marry me before he hung up. He said not anymore. I feel as though my whole world is falling apart. I cried and screamed in the most painful way I have ever experienced. I thought I would marry this guy. Sure, we have our problems, but I always believed relationships are meant to work through difficulties because of love. I took a day off work because I would not be able to cope with it. Then on March 3rd, I was removed from my work group chats and taken off the schedule. My coworkers, who adored me, asked if I had quit. I told them no and acknowledged that I had been removed from everything. I did not understand why, so I called my assistant manager. We do not have a general manager because he was fired months ago. My assistant manager told me to call my regional manager. I received no response, so I texted her. I inquired if I was fired. She informed me that she would set up a time to talk. The next day, I asked for an update, and she is actively avoiding me without providing a reason for my termination. Fortunately, my coworkers relayed the message, and it eventually reached me. I was fired because I gave scraps to a former coworker who is homeless, scraps that we would otherwise throw away. My regional manager despises him because he has made inappropriate comments, which I understand, but that does not mean he should starve. The guy had not eaten anything for 3 days. Being autistic, I have a strong sense of justice and am also a believer in God. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love your enemies. I simply wanted to do a nice thing and I got fired for it. Other coworkers were helping him as well, but I received the worst outcome. Since then, I have been completely bedridden and doom-scrolling, lacking the motivation to do schoolwork or seek another job. I am spiraling into depression. I wake up every day with an overwhelming amount of anxiety that persists throughout the day and continues into the night. Then, I cannot sleep until 5 a.m., and I end up sleeping through my entire morning. My ex still haunts my dreams, and as soon as I wake up, I start crying. I feel a void inside my heart. I do not go outside, and because of that, I feel incapable of replacing him. I now have almost nothing going for me besides attempting to pass my college classes. I want to give up. It all hurts. I need someone to give me the longest hug I have ever had, but I suppose I do not have anyone for that. My friends are always busy and socializing. I get invited, but anxiety overwhelms me, and I would prefer to stay in bed. I would like to meet someone new, but I am terrified of investing my effort into something just for it to go to waste. I'm now scared of love. It feels unpredictable, superficial. No one appreciates old-fashioned romance anymore. No one has good intentions anymore. No one is selfless anymore. I cannot eat most of the time due to how I feel now. I felt as though I used to be able to soar high, but now I am crashing and facing a harsh reality.